Welcome in all you members of the Duuuval Devout. This is, of course, Kyle Nash, the student of the game, bringing you into the Duval Dive. And, of course, with me here is not my personal champion, Travis D. Holmes, but somebody just as good with his talents as well. Touring the AFC South's own General Mike Patton. What's going on? You weren't actually military service that I'm aware of, but whatever. When it comes to me, you
No.
in charge. When it comes to covering things AFC South. There you go. See, I got to use my dad joke anyway. Everybody wins. So, the irony is we did manage to get him in the previous episode, Mike, but it's the first episode with the Believe Networks. You got to do the bell now. And he made this new background in all its spiffy glory, and his name is there, but you don't see him for us taking it out of the garage. You got poor guy. Anyways, he'll be fine. He's with the fam. He's traveling. He'll be fine. Anyways, speaking of people that may not be so in good a state, I wanted to just have a braver moment this particular week here as we're doing this show, Mike, in that I think it was last week. It's titled Hottest Takes, but I believe the actual term put in the mailbag question from the members of the Duval Devout, I forgot to look up the contributor's name, NSFB or something like that. I think it was something like that. But he asked us for, and I'm going to put this in air quotes, our boldest, crackheadiest take that we could come up with. Now, Travis had some zingers in there themselves. If you hadn't heard that yet, it would have been a shakeup with the offensive line. Of course, we've talked a lot about the offensive line here, and it actually leads to some of what it was. And for those that don't remember it, it was me saying that for all the moves that the Jags have made and for everything that's going on in the AFC South is a power vacuum, and that the Jags may find their ability to climb to the top of the crown. Now, I'm not here to say that that's a lock, but when you look at the division, there's really, in my opinion, only two proven viable quarterbacks. Obviously, there's an opportunity for Cam Ward to shine in ways that Will Levis never could. I just feel better about Ward coming out into the NFL. You and I have had these conversations out there in the Twiniverse. Mike Patton, Andy, too, by the way, if you're going to take care of that and watch that happen in real time, because it will at some point. And listen, I mean, no disrespect to our good friend Sports After Dark Zone, C. Luke, Chris Lewis, but I just don't like the state of the Colts quarterback position. I don't like the state of a lot of their positions, to be honest, but that's a separate conversation. And the Texans, for as inevitable as they were supposed to be last year and barely beating the Jags in both games, as the offensive line connoisseur here, I'm not really impressed with what they did with their O-line to better protect C.J. Stroud. The Jags are in this if everything goes the way that it should, and that doesn't even begin and end with Travis Hunter. I'm just talking about the healing continuing to begin with this roster, not subbing out defensive players like it's a hockey rotation, and the healing having begun with the departure of Trent Baalke. General, lead the charge and tell me where I got it wrong.
Well, I'll start with one thing. I remember listening to the whole power vacuum discussion, I remember hearing about the offensive line and about how the Jaguars secured the offensive line and how the Titans were still trying to figure it out. Well, I would say this. Both offensive lines definitely had their issues last year.
Yes.
So I think both offensive lines are still trying to figure it out, piece it together, get that chemistry going as well. So I would say they're kind of in the same boat when it comes to that scenario. I would say the Texans, I totally agree with you. I don't necessarily like what they did with their offensive line. They're bringing in the immortal Cam Robinson. I know Jaguars fans remember him quite well. And you're bringing in a vet in Laken Tomlinson as well. And then you're trading for a guy from the Vikings. I mean, honestly, looking at all three of those names, I'm not sure you're improving your offensive line. I will say Blake Fisher gets a chance to actually start. He was the tackle opposite of Joe Alt at Notre Dame, by the way, folks. He was a second-round pick. Ursery, another guy that the Texans picked up, he could potentially end up beating out Cam Robinson to be the starting tackle there. So it's a lot of question marks there and not a lot of solid things there, but we'll see what happens. We'll see how that evolves. So I can definitely see where the Jaguars could be right there with them, especially if they get the production out of their front four or front five, depending on if it's 3-4 or 4-3. There. So we'll see what happens. The Colts definitely. I can say I definitely don't like the quarterback situation. You've got Indiana Jones. I'm saying Indiana Jones just because they that was the first thing I heard the Colts tried to run with when they signed him, and I was like, nah, that's disrespecting Harrison Ford. But to me, to me, I'm just like, hey, that's Daniel Jones and that's Anthony Richardson. I think they really want Anthony Richardson to win the job, and from all that I'm hearing, he's definitely focused. And from a quote that DeForest Buckner had talked about, said he was in the zone and all in, which is good. But you still have to go out there and apply it on the field versus a Daniel Jones who's trying to redeem his career right now, being that he's on his third team in 12 months. So yeah, definitely is going to be interesting. And I can see where the Jaguars and the power vacuum could definitely be a playoff competitive team. However, I don't think it's a pull away train because anything can happen. Not the Wild Wild West, the Wild Wild South.
Hey, listen, first of all, great points all the way around. I will add this one aspect. See, you and I both like to have fun, General, and you mentioned that you don't want to call Daniel Jones the Dimes, as it were, Indiana Jones, because it's disrespectful to Harrison Ford. See, me for a minute there, I thought you were calling him Indiana Jones because you expect the Colts to get whipped. Anyways, so I had to. You set the table. I had to eat. I'm sorry, but with all that in mind, I think, and you bring up the offensive line, and you're right. The Jags' offensive line is in flux. I don't think that's a question. And you mentioned the movements that the Texans made, the moves that the Titans were made, which, listen, to your credit, I didn't consider that deeply enough. You're probably right. I do know that making a move to protect Cam Ward is smart, because say what you will about Mario Cristobal there at the University of Miami, the dude knows how to recruit and find beef to protect his guys, simply put. That all being said, with the Jags acquisitions, and this is where I think there's difference, and why I've made the statement, is I feel confident that basically every offensive lineman they procured is an upgrade over somebody, whether they're a direct start or a potential depth addition, right? We don't need to get into Luke Fortner in the center situation with Ryan Hainsey, and it's not just because of familiarity with the system, okay? Travis D. Holmes being a stand for Luke Fortner by calling him the best backup in the NFL when he was still starting. Anyways, so with all that in mind, the other guys that they've brought in that we've talked about at length here on the Duval Dive, and I'm sure you've brought up on touring the AFC South. You get a bell too. That's cool. And even bringing Wyatt Millum and Jonah Monheim at center as well for guys that will add depth in their own right. A lot of good things we're hearing out of camp. I think it's just, you mentioned the other movements. The Jags overhaul of bringing in 6 dudes in the offseason, including the draft, is such a big thing, because we as followers of the Jags who are watching them closely and do what they do here between our coverages have heard Bulky, Shad Khan, and even at points Doug Peterson in the past promise a more physical team up front, and that did not happen. The first evidence it might is here with Liam Coen. The power vacuum thing, I mentioned the quarterbacks. You mentioned Indiana Jones. Great touch by you. I think Cam Ward is a wild card. I agree with you on that. I'm more confident in him, as I said, than I was Will Levis. But the guys with the proven talent, getting better protected is key. I know you've said what you've said about CJ Stroud being let down by his crew. Is there something you see with the Texans that you think has done anything to stop that trend of not doing enough for him? That's the question I have when it comes to Houston, right?
Right. Honestly, I'm interested to see just the development of this line and kind of bringing them together. I mean, you pretty much have all linemen that are not there from last year, except for Juice Scruggs, in terms of your offensive lineman. And I'm pretty sure there are a lot of Texans fans that don't want Juice Scruggs there either. But the Shaq Mason cut became real on June 1st. He's a post June 1st cut. So
Correct. Yeah.
so now they've got all these different guys up there, and they have to find a way to put them all together and not have their quarterback running all over the place. Who, by the way, I don't know if you saw, but he has general soreness in his arm right now.
Oh dear. No, I hadn't.
So he hasn't been throwing the football in OTAs. Now, of course, they said it was general soreness and they're doing the precautionary, but I've talked to Texans people and they're like, hey, it's still early, but if it happens in like training camp or that aspect, then there's some concern. But I kind of threw the concern out there now, in my opinion, because we all remember Matthew Stafford in the 2022 season. He had general soreness and arm fatigue. They said it led to elbow injury. Ultimately, he ended up missing 8 games, had one of his worst seasons as a Ram. I would say his worst season as a Ram. 10 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, missed 8 games. I don't want that for CJ Stroud, but, telling me that, it's raining outside and it's something else, I'm not for sure you want to, that's the feeling I'm kind of getting. But, I would gladly be wrong for his health reasons. But, yeah, getting back to the line. Yeah, they've got to figure out a few things up there because, one, you don't want your quarterback running around. CJ Stroud, not necessarily a running quarterback. He can run, but not necessarily running quarterback. And
Right.
Also, with the general soreness, you don't want to make that worse as the season goes on.
No, wow, and no, I hadn't heard that. So thank you for bringing that here tonight. And I'll say this: you mentioned Matt Stafford. I think that represents a worst case scenario. Let's pretend it's just a Joe Burrow thing, and he gets a slow start. That's a rough go in a division that's going to be potentially tightly competitive when you're the one with the first place schedule out there in the group. And this is a year where the schedule is relatively more difficult, right? And by that I mean the fact that you have the divisions outside of the AFC South that you're facing. This isn't like you're going against the AFC East. That's not a thing here,
Right.
I think it is the North this year, right? So with that in mind, that's a tough draw anyway. And by the way, I believe it's the AFC West. Excuse me, NFC West as well.
It's the NFC West and the AFC West. I think they see this year.
I said North, didn't I? Okay, yeah. So it's the 2 West teams. Oh, so they're
now
on Mahomes the second, right?
Now I will also tell you that that does mean that Cleveland does play against the Tennessee Titans this year, which we all know what's going to be talked about a lot in that game, especially if a particular gentleman starts for the Cleveland Browns in that game.
That's a fascinating point you make. And here I was thinking it was just a big deal that Liam Coen was facing his Rams in London. No, that's a fine point you make there too, sir. On that, I am not lost. But yeah, and well, let me add this too. And I focus on the Texans because I feel like they're still the favorites, I think, in the division. I think that's a safe assumption today, mostly because we don't know what the Titans or the Jags, frankly, are right now because of a lot of the changes, and especially in the case of both, especially in the case of the Titans, it's the quarterback. The Jags, it's just seemingly everywhere else. So, so with that in mind, the Texans' depth at receiver, them getting Christian Kirk, them having guys that are already talented, their issue is keeping those guys on the field. I mean, compounds it too. But how confident are you in just the Texans? We mentioned the offensive line specifically, but I feel like the rest of the staff, if healthy, and that's the big question mark, is still a threat, right?
The Texans, they're deep up front, but also do you really have guys you believe in? You got to remember Tank Dell's going to be out for the season. Steph Diggs is not there. He's in New England and also partying with Cardi B. Then you have I had to throw that one in there. I couldn't help it. But
I'm not talking about teams getting whipped like Indiana Jones. That only makes it worse now. Never mind. Continue.
But yeah, they just John Mechie is a guy that is a great story coming back from cancer, but I'm not sure how many Texas fans believe in him. You also have a Jalen Noel and a Jaden Higgins they drafted from Iowa State. You got the big man in Higgins, which he's 6'4", about 215. And then you got Noel's a little bitty small guy, which more likely to be a slot guy eventually. So you've got some interesting pieces. You got some depth there, but you got some depth that people have a lot of question marks about when it comes to everyone behind Nico Collins, to be honest.
So, I mean, basically, and as I've said for the past couple seasons for the Colts, I think it remains true for the other two teams that we're referencing here. Of course, the Jags and the Texans, the health of the quarterback is going to be a paramount contributor to success. And obviously that's true of any NFL team, but I think it's more compounded here, right?
Right. I'll say this also, for those that don't know, Cam Ward's been coming to the camp at 5:00 in the morning, every morning for the Tennessee Titans, and kind of almost had to be kicked out of the facility by the coaches. So he's been doing that ever since he's been here in Tennessee, which is a huge thing for a lot of Titans fans and gives them a lot of hope. So, that part of it as well. So, that part of it, he's doing better than Levis right now too. So I would say but I'm not saying Levis didn't study. Levis did study a lot. And, if you listen to Colton Dow, his rookie year, Levis was always in the playbook. It just didn't always translate to the field. That's
no, we absolutely knew Levis got there early. That's how we found out about the mayonnaise in his coffee. So with all that, no, but I that's great you brought that up too. Which, by the way, if you followed the General Mike Patton and Mike Patton 82, you would have heard about all that and seen some of his stuff from camp. Boom, how's that for a plug? So with all that in mind, I do want to close it with this. You have heard my theory. Do you agree that a power vacuum is forming, if it doesn't already exist, in the AFC South, which you so often tour?
I don't know if I would call it a power vacuum. I would call it organized chaos.
I like it. I'll take it.
Yeah. As far as to me, I'm like, yeah, because a lot of chaos can happen. And within that chaos, great things or bad things, depending upon where you finish, could happen as well. Like, for example, a couple years ago, no one ever expected the Houston Texans to win the division. Yet there they were, because the Titans didn't do what they were supposed to do. The Colts didn't do as well, and the Jaguars didn't do as well. So one team had to step up, and that just happened to be C.J. Stroud and the Houston Texans a couple years ago. So I say that to say, Jacksonville Jaguar fans, anything is possible. Just like Kevin Garnett said, just like Jason Tatum kind of ripped off when he won his title too. But anything is possible. The Jacksonville Jaguars do have the pieces when it comes to the skill position players. Defensively, I think they added some pieces. Eric Armstead moving down more inside, great thing to do. They have the ability. It's just a matter of, can they take that ability and make it reality? Ability to reality. Can we make that happen? If I'm a Jaguars fan, that's what I'm thinking and looking at.
So what I hear you advising all of the Duval devout to do is to not throw away their "It was always the Jags" t-shirt, because if they do manage to take advantage of the power vacuum, that phrase is going to return to Duval. And I wouldn't necessarily be mad at it by any stretch of the imagination. I would love to cover more Jaguars playoff football. So the playoff game I went to went pretty well, facing those Chargers that one time there at Everbank Stadium. I'm just saying. So,
yeah, you said the right team, right? The Chargers. Yeah, you know what happens, man.
Far be it from me to take away
the Texans got them too. So hey, they had fun with there too.
Hey, I'll put it this way: I can't knock your statement when former Jaguar mojo himself, Maurice Jones-Drew, at halftime said the Chargers would still Charger. To his credit, that very night. There you go. So, General Mike Patton, tell the world where you could be found.
You can find me on all listening platforms, of course, touring the AFC South and all listening platforms, and also on the Mike Patton Network. And you can also find me on Instagram and Threads and places as well. But the main place you can find me is on Twitter and Blue Sky at Mike Patton 82, MikePatton 82.
Very good stuff, General. Always an honor, joy, and privilege to talk to you. Just anyways, even greater to have you on the show today as well. Of course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at the SOTG. Find me on Facebook as the student of the game. Check out my writings for your Jacksonville Jaguars on the Fans First Sports Network, as well as my work writing for the Orlando Magic. And of course, my coverage of the UCF Knights football and basketball on the Night Shift podcast, as well as the Night Shift YouTube channel. Like and subscribe there. And of course, most importantly, like and subscribe on the Duval Dive. Until next time, everyone, for the General Mike Patton of touring the AFC South and awaiting soon, hopefully, the return of Travis D. Holmes. It's Kyle Nash, student of the game. Until next time, everyone, class dismissed.